Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now on our 39th episode of 2024. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor for Five for Breakfast. We have some really exciting events coming up. I'm going to be traveling to Central America this weekend for our Latin America Fiber Connect event in Panama City, Panama this weekend. They'll be on October 1st and 2nd. And then we'll be heading up to Calgary, Alberta for October 8th. And then we'll do our final Fiber Connect workshop in Albuquerque, New Mexico on November 7th. That is going to be focused on tribal broadband. And if you were in Des Moines a few weeks ago, that was epic. We had our precision agriculture, probably our best regional workshop to date. So we'll keep trying to keep getting better and better. So we're excited about that. And today we have a very special Five for Breakfast session on permitting. Our guests today are Drew Gardner from the Benton Institute, Ian Lisson from the City of Mesa, Jill Springer from NTIA, and Karsi Mitzner from Brightspeed discuss the multi-stakeholder permitting summit we held at Georgetown University's Law School, and the recent report on findings and recommendations from the summit, which is titled Permitting Success Strategies for ISPs and Local Governments. Before I formally introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from the team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We appreciate it. And like Gary said, I've just got a couple of quick housekeeping items, but before we go into those, I just want to once again thank our platinum sponsor for Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, if everybody would please keep in mind, all participants are in listen-only mode today. To ask a question, please type it into the question box, which is located in the control panel on the upper right side of the screen. We will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's presentation. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on FPA's website within 24 to 48 hours, and you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. And finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you will be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. We appreciate you taking a moment to provide your input. And with that, I will pass things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David. Good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the president and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber Breakfast, our guest was Robert Giz, the president and CEO of the Canadian Telecommunications Association, who discussed connecting North America above and below the 49th parallel. FBA is putting a lot of focus on Canada, and we will be in Calgary on October 8th as we work towards representing all of North America, not just being US-centric. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. David, if you could drop in the chat the White House video on broadband. So the White House just released a nice little short YouTube with President Biden speaking to a rural family with a family business on kind of the impact that the Treasury Capital Projects Fund and has made on their lives. So it's kind of a fun little video. Congratulations, Joey and the White House, on your success on broadband rollout so far. Today on Five for Breakfast, we have a very special session on permitting. Our guests today are Drew Gardner from the Benton Institute, Ian Lisson from the City of Mesa, Jill Springer from NTIA, and Karsi Mitzner from Brightspeed to discuss the multi-stakeholder permitting summit we held at Georgetown University Law School and the recent report on the findings and recommendations from this summit, which is titled Permitting Success Strategies for ISPs and Local Governments. And I think David has put that report into the chat. So hopefully you guys can take a look at that. So Drew Gardner is the Deputy Director for the Broadband State Education Project, leading efforts on broadband affordability and policy education for government and the public, with prior experience as a state broadband policy advisor and legislative fellow. Ian Lisson is an assistant to the city manager and has worked to bring multiple new ISPs to Mesa. Jill, as you guys all know, she's been a regular on Five for Breakfast. She returned to NTI Commerce as a senior policy advisor for permitting and the chief review and permitting officer last year after a decade of working on infrastructure and tribal issues at the FCC. And Karsi Mitzner is the Government Affairs and Public Policy Director for Brightspeed, and she's based out of Austin, Texas, and is on the company's federal, state, and local government relations team. So welcome, Drew, Ian, Jill, and Carsey. And for our audience, please type in your questions and comments, and we'll work them into the discussion. With that, I will turn things over to Drew to kick things off.
Thanks, Gary. So I'm Drew Garner. I helped to write the report that we linked initially in the chat, the Permitting Success, Closing the Digital Divide Through Local Broadband Permitting. And the way we wrote this paper, the way we got to the findings and the conclusions was through a national summit on local broadband permitting, which, as Gary said, was hosted by the Georgetown Law Institute for Technology, Law, and Policy. What we did was we invited almost 30 of the nation's leading permitting experts, local permitting experts, to Georgetown. And these experts represented sort of all the stakeholders that we think are important to the permitting process. We had local governments represented, we had private landowners represented, we had federal agencies represented, state offices represented, and then nonprofit experts in the mix too. So it was 28 speakers who were at this panel on a big round table. And the goal of this summit was to put all of these experts in conversation with each other and to identify areas of consensus and areas of disagreement. And then through an iterative conversation process, sort of work towards solutions, like how can we implement these areas of agreements, or what do we need to do to resolve the disagreement? And that conversation is what we translated into the findings of our report. All of these panelists were represented there too, so they'll be speaking about some of their contributions. But I'll just outline a few of the big buckets that we found in our report. There were three. The first one talks about the communications process between the internet service provider and the local government. Like, what is required? When should you start meeting? What should you say when you're meeting? What should you understand about your the other partner? Like, what are their priorities and what do you need to tell them? So we define sort of that interaction and the partnership that should arise between the ISP and the local government. The second big bucket is the need for additional resources. Probably the most universal theme and area of consensus across our members was that for local broadband offices to manage the upcoming wave of BEAD applications, they're going to need a consummate increase in resources because it takes work and resources to permit. So if you want to permit more, you're going to need more resources. The question was, where should these resources come from and what form should they take? We explore that in the paper, and we'll probably talk about that today. And then the third main bucket was improvements to the permitting process itself. So this has to do with transparency, online permitting forms, the shift from paper documentation to digital documentation, and some of those technical aspects that will just make the process smoother. So that is the overview of our paper. We also have some case studies that explore in detail and some checklists that we would just advise permit applicants and permitting offices to sort of consider as they engage in the permitting process. So with that, Gary, I'll pass it over to you to get us started with our panelists.
Thanks, Drew. Well, why don't we pass it to, I know Ian has some opening comments.
Yeah, definitely. So full disclosure, I was not the participant from Mesa who went to this this group, so I'm just pretending that I am now. But I'm very, very happy to kind of talk through some of these issues because everything that Drew mentioned is top of mind for Mesa as we were looking to bring in new providers. So just to give you some context, Mesa is about 20 minutes outside of Phoenix. And our council, just about a couple years ago and change, decided we didn't want just good internet connectivity in Mesa. We wanted the best internet connectivity in Mesa. And so we really set out to see what we could do as a city, as a regulatory body, to entice companies to come in. And without going through all of that, one of the big components really is the permitting process. It's ensuring that there's a transparent process, as Drew mentioned, that folks know what know what to expect when they're working with us, that they have certainty on turnaround times, and that piece is a big deal to us. So we've always had a standard here to do 8-day turnaround times when we receive permits. And that may seem fast, that may seem slow, but we're a city of about 145 square miles, and we have 4 permit reviewers. And so that is just not enough staff, right? And so we knew that we were about to get inundated once we had signed these new licenses with the ISPs with a bunch of new permit requests. So we were kind of scrambling. What are we going to do to maintain that turnaround time? And then in addition, the incumbents who were already here, the existing right-of-way users, they came to us nervous and rightly so, saying, are we going to now have to fight in these queues to get our projects continuing to move as the new folks came in? And we said, no, we're going to make sure that everybody gets the same level of service that you've always received from Mesa. And so what we had traditionally done in the past was, and this is common, I know, across the country, we'd offered a different level of fees for different types of turnaround time. So if you wanted faster than 8 days, you could pay an expedited permit fee. You could even go to a super expedited permit fee. But we just knew that, again, with the volume that we were expecting, that probably wasn't going to cut it anymore. We figured, and in talking with the new folks and even the existing right-of-way users, that many of them were going to opt for even that super expedited fee. So that still created a staffing problem for us because it wasn't helping us increase the number of permit reviewers that we had. So something that we had dabbled in very lightly years ago was this idea of talking with the right-of-way users and having them actually pay for their own dedicated permit reviewers that would be solely assigned to their projects and focus, day in, day out on those submissions. We ended up calling it our consultant reimbursement agreement, and it's really been working fantastically for us because it's what we've done is we've got some contractors essentially on procurement that's already gone through that process that we can pull from when needed. The companies, they know kind of what the volume is that they're anticipating, and so they can scale up. It's kind of like using an Amazon web server. You get to scale up depending on how much internet traffic you're using. They're doing the same thing here, depending on how much permit volume they want to have with the city. We then pull the city actually hires these contractors, so they're contractors for the city of Mesa, but then we get reimbursed by the providers. And so that has enabled us in recent years, in the past couple of years, to do over 3,000 permits a year, which has equated just on these fiber projects to over 10 million linear feet that has been permitted across Mesa just over the past couple of years. So it's been working out really, really great for us, and love to keep talking about this. There's a lot of other stuff that has gone into how we made this all work, but that was a big critical piece that I just thought I would share with you all.
Thanks, Ian. Carsey, can you tell us from the ISP perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to thank you, Gary, for hosting this discussion and just give the perspective of the ISP of why this permitting summit was important to us. You probably already know, Gary, that Brightspeed has been engaged in a multi-year, multi-billion-dollar investment in rolling out fiber in our 20-state footprint to more than 4 million homes and businesses. And those are mostly in rural and suburban areas. So we've been very busy in the past couple of years, building in those cities, counties, parishes, and our goal is to get that fiber connectivity to the customers as quickly as possible. And we know that that's the goal of the communities as well. Like I said, these are rural and suburban communities that may not have had connectivity of this kind before at all. And so they're very anxious for it, and we want to get it out as soon as possible as well. So, and we know that a lot of these rural areas may lack resources. So our goal is their goal, but we want to make sure that that relationship is maintained. Relationship with our communities is really important because we're there to serve them. We're there for the long term. We want to partner with our communities. So this permitting summit, which we thought was really a great opportunity to bring people together that have that common cause of wanting to get that fiber, the broadband out to as many people as possible, as soon as possible. Get all those people in the room together that have knowledge of the local permitting process, raise awareness of the issue, and then come up with a good list of recommendations that can help with streamlining that process. And so we were really happy with the summit. We thought it was successful, really pleased with the paper, and just very fortunate to have been a participant.
No, I have to agree. I would say, it was a real pleasure for me to participate in the summit because it was probably the most productive summit I've ever been, largely to Gigi's leadership and the Benton Institute. Really appreciate the way they structured that. But also the stakeholders around the table. I wasn't aware of how many different, the difference in perspectives between ISPs, local governments, national, regulators and agencies, and just all the different stakeholders. So it was great to find common ground, and then also, but even more important, to find areas of different opinions. And the ISPs, Brightspeed's expertise, Google, a number of the other ISPs, it was really useful. So Drew, the report talks about return on investments that local governments can achieve through the permitting process. Can you elaborate on that? And what do local governments stand from, the gain from permitting?
Yeah, this was a sort of consistent theme throughout the summit, but the data generated through the permitting process, if captured and then sort of displayed publicly or retained by the city, can be incredibly valuable just for the city. I think Mesa is actually a fantastic example because they have some maps that they have generated through data from their permitting applications that they're able to identify where construction is going to happen, where some of the infrastructure already exists. So being able to, so the better you collect the data from the permitting application and then retain it, lay it on a map, that can be super useful. One, just so the city knows how to protect its own infrastructure, but two, like Mesa, for attracting additional investment. Because if you can say to a new fiber entrant that we know where the infrastructure is, we're going to be able to expedite the permitting process and make this easier for you, that's appealing. That can attract new providers. So that is like a value a local government will get if they invest in improving their permitting application. It's long term, but it will be something that they will start to generate. And that's something around the table people were exploring. We also explore a few other sort of items, ways you can benefit return on investment, such as just the public awareness. If you know when the permits are asking for construction, that makes it easier to automate public announcements or to coordinate with traffic control. So the more you can collect this data and integrate it digitally, I think the better. I'll pause there to see, Ian, if you have any thoughts on like why Mesa has benefited from all this data.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you nailed it. It is invaluable for us to better understand just what's in the ground. I mean, it obviously hasn't been the case. We've had stuff on the ground for over 100 years here, believe it or not, even though we're still a relatively new city compared nationally. But there's no data on that, and so you just kind of have to guess. Or if there is a blueprint or there's an as-built or something like that, it's usually off. So we actually bake into our license agreements with all the new providers that they do need to provide us some sort of digital form for their build. So whether that's a shapefile or what have you, so that we have that, and we do build maps with it. There is some state law here that does prohibit us from actually sharing the full networks publicly, but we at least can have it internally. It helps us do utility coordination now into perpetuity. Because we've got a really good idea of where that is. And look, what the reason we're all doing this at the end of the day is to provide better internet for our community. So if we can have a better understanding where this is going, if we can expedite our permitting process, our community is getting access to the world's fastest internet as fast as possible. So I couldn't be happier with how we've put all that together, but would totally agree data collection is crucial.
One of the things that I didn't have awareness of is how tight the coordination, with what's going on in these communities, how important it is, not only to have your permitting and know when you're going to be able to do that, but to align with, the city's plans on resurfacing roads and other things going on. Because, maybe Ian and Karshi, you guys can speak to this, but, obviously you don't want, there's some sewer or whatever construction underway, and you don't want to all of a sudden say, oh, now we're going to go, do more construction on that road, or you don't want the city to have resurface all the roads and then come back and tear it up a week later. So just trying to not only get your permits approved, but coordinate on timing. So, you know, the famous dig once. I don't know if you guys can comment on that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
Gary, that's,
go ahead, Carsey. Yeah.
sorry. That is a big theme, I think, of the paper is communication and outreach and transparency. And that's something we've taken to heart at Brightspeed is we like to reach out to the communities where we're going to be building ahead of time. Before we even submit a permit, we want to just have that face-to-face conversation and get that intel about, are you going to be updating your water and sewer lines? Are you going to be doing a beautification project downtown? Something along those lines so that we can coordinate around that, do the dig once if that's possible, or coordinate with other utilities that might be working in the area. All that information is so valuable, and it's important to get it ahead of time. And you can only get that if you reach out and have that communication and start that relationship early before you're under a deadline to get the construction done.
And the only thing I'd add, and I know this is not easy for everybody or possible for every locality to do this, but speaking of data, if you can have essentially real-time information on what your municipal projects are, so whether it's your CIP, whether it's your mill and overlay, whatever it is, and you can provide that to your right-of-way users, that also has just paid huge dividends for us. So we have essentially that real-time system. Our folks check the ISPs and the folks going into the right-of-way can check in on that. Every day, see what's about to happen. And then our permit folks, our reviewers will actually remind the submitters that if they submit a permit, they're like, well, didn't you check this out? Because we've actually got, we've got something going on. So maybe you want to think about moving that to the other street. And they go, oh, you're right. I missed that piece or whatever. And then we've actually already done a pretty decent job. We can't be perfect on this, but we've started to then work like our repavings. Once a micro trench comes through, and then a month later we repave it. So we're trying our best to do that, and it's made our transportation folks grumble a little bit because they've shifted timeframes a bit. But the whole point is just constant communication, coordination, making sure everybody's aware of what everybody else is doing.
Well,
and I'll just highlight that universally at the summit, that sort of need to reduce those repeated excavations was seen as a value across the board. And it's a reason to invest in your permitting processes. Granted, if you have the resources to do so.
So one of the questions that came in, and this is a big thorny question, is about pole attachments and the focus on overall permitting. But one of the concerns, especially in California, is the ability to put up temporary poles, when pole owners are not replacing poles timely. This is a big issue on its own. And so I don't know how we're going to be tackling that, but any comments that you guys want to make on that?
Yeah, well, I'll just say for the report, our report was narrowly focused on local permitting for broadband. So we scoped out poles, we scoped out federal permitting, we scoped out tribal permitting, and state issues, railroads, bridges, just because we only had a day. And this is a huge topic. So I'll just say there are, I know Shelby, Schools, Health, Libraries, Broadband Association, they're working on polls. Pew Charitable Trust has worked on polls. But that, for us at least, for our report, the conversation for another day, but I'll pause there. I will say that in our report, we have included a series of slides, recent slides from NTIA that Jill Springer has been working on. That has a series of information that sort of touches the whole universe of broadband permitting. So for that information, you could look at the bottom of our report, one of the last appendices, to see the NTIA's work, or just go to NTIA.
Thanks, Drew.
I'll stop there.
Yeah, I know it's always contentious. We don't want to shy away from thorny stuff, but today's call is about the permitting summit. So, Carsey, can you just kind of net out what you thought was the most impactful recommendations from the paper?
Yes. So I think the paper does a really good job of listing some common sense and practical steps that can be taken both by ISPs and local governments and the federal and state. And I think personally, I think the checklists are really helpful at the back of the document. It's a good resource to point to if someone is saying, hey, I'm from a locality, I need a list of things I could do. Can you provide that to me? That's at the back of the document. It's a good summary for all the different players in this ecosystem to get some examples of common sense solutions that they could take. And some of those examples that we really like, which I touched on, is the communication, both from ISP side, which I explained earlier, and also from the locality side, the cities and counties, like making the permit requirements available online and allowing for transparency of where we're at in the permitting process. Transparency and communication, very important. And just one other that I wanted to highlight that we think it would really help us streamline our processes is avoiding duplication where we can. And the permitting paper talks about that. Like an example is allowing for changes to your permit to be in process instead of having to start over from the beginning. If you have a change, just, do it halfway through and make the change and keep going instead of restarting it all. That kind of thing. Or reducing requirements in already analyzed areas for whatever reason, allowing bulk permitting for similar types of work over a larger geographic area instead of submitting different permits for the same kind of thing. All of that would really help us streamline the process. So those are some of the big takeaways we'd like to see implemented and are good examples of things that can be done to help streamline the process.
And Drew, throughout the summit, was there anything that really surprised you?
You're on mute, Drew.
I learned, yes, in that I learned a lot about restoration agreements and like all the many things that have to be thought of when you restore a construction site. For example, Ting mentioned that when they went into a new community, way before even beginning any construction, they had to get down to the level of granularity where they were talking about the type of paint they would use to locate and mark streets, because they needed something for this community that would be water soluble so that it would wash away and leave sort of a pristine environment, because many communities justly value the aesthetics of their roads and everything. So balancing the need for that water solubility with also it has to remain there during rain throughout the construction process. Like those little stories, those really concrete examples, I thought were very educational and useful.
Well, I hate that we're out of time, and I just want, unfortunately, Jill Springer from NTIA's, she had a little bit of technical challenges trying to do this inside the government, getting on GoToWebinar platform. So I just want to say that we greatly appreciated Jill's leadership and continued leadership on permitting throughout the summit, and just the way that NTIA has worked with not only Fiber Broadband Association, but all our members and everybody that's looking at BEAD. So Jill is just a fantastic leader, and NTIA has just been doing a tremendous job on all fronts, but especially on permitting and helping us try to make sure that we accelerate, especially as BEAD's coming up. So, so thank Jill, and sorry that she had some technical difficulties here. And thank you guys all, Drew, Ian, and Carsey, and everybody who participated in the summit. It was just a great day. I learned so much, and I really feel like, Drew, thanks for leading on the development of the actual report and recommendations. I want to thank you guys for joining us today. Look forward to getting back together next Wednesday. We're going to get together with Elizabeth Feldenbaum, one of the top analysts in our industry from Omni, who's going to discuss her latest research on looking beyond speed, the connected home, monetizing opportunities and trends. So you're not going to want to miss that. It's always great to have our industry analysts to talk about research. So we'll see you guys next Wednesday. I'll be dialing in from Central America. So hopefully maybe you guys can join me as well at our Latin America event next week. Thanks, everyone.
Gary, I just wanted to flag that we got, I think, Jill.
Yeah,
there's Jill.
they finally fixed everything, and I apologize. It was a great report, and I'm sorry that I missed the discussion.
But did you have any closing comments that you want to make, Jill, just before we lose our audience?
Yeah, sure, if you have a minute. I think it was really great to spend the day together, and I know that in talking about the interactions that we had with local permitting, NTIA has been doing a lot on the federal permitting improvement side and working with the states, but it was really helpful to hear the local perspective. And, you know, I know one of the things that surprised me, because I feel like every meeting I go into, I learn a whole lot, was that some of the localities expressed that dig once policies were that they had invested in those and felt a little bit burned when industry would come back and not be interested in using them. So I feel like there was a lot of really good dialogue, and I know I'm really appreciative to have participated. We were able to put together a deck and do some thinking here with my permitting team about strategies for local permitting and the importance, and that is an appendix in the report. So, you know, I just want to say this has a lot of value and really encourage everybody to take a look at it. There's some great ideas in there. And I think that the conversations are ongoing. So NTIA certainly is really thankful for the opportunity to be in this conversation despite the technical problems. And we'll certainly keep working as hard on local permitting as we have been on streamlining federal permitting.
Well, Jill, thanks again for your leadership. We just greatly appreciate how engaged you are, how easy you are to, to share ideas with, and just everything that you're doing to kind of moving the yardsticks on permitting. It's, I can't think of a more important topic. So thank you very much for all that leadership.
And thanks to you. Really appreciate the work that you do as well, and all of your members, the opportunity to work with all your members.
All right, well, we'll see you guys soon. Thanks again.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
all.
Thanks all.